everyone. Welcome back from the morning break. I hope you've got your coffee. I hope you've got your tea. I know I actually have both. I do have coffee and green tea with me right now. Coming up in the next session, we actually have Nicole Lyons, who is head of the communications department for AGL. Now, Nicole has been working in comms and marketing for more than 20 years across multiple industries, including publishing, wine, and for the last 12 years in energy, most recently with AGL. She leads the corporate comms team in the organization, and during this time, she's led various high-profile brand and communication programs across employee, media, customer, and investor audiences. Now, this includes the AGL rebrand, the biannual results announcement, the embedding of their refreshed purpose and values, as well as their recent move into the telco category. She's passionate about developing content that is fresh, relevant, and takes advantage of new channels. So, Nicole, welcome. We're so pleased to have you. I'll let you go ahead and share your screen and take it away.
Hey, thank you for that introduction, Christy. That was lovely. So it's great to be here today in this sort of strange virtual environment. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners on the land on which we meet today, and I'm in Melbourne, actually working out of my son's bedroom. So that is the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. So and obviously also acknowledging the traditional owners on which all of you are today. So I'm going to start to share my screen, and hopefully that will work. I just had a quick practice. Christy and Emily, if you can just let me know if it is working,
Sure.
That would be great. How's that? Or if you got my notes?
Perfect. Nope, looks good.
Okay, great. All right, so as you'd all be aware, my topic today is about communicating, engaging with employees in the new digital world. And I think this is a really relevant topic for internal communication practitioners, because while we've got all these brilliant digital tools at our fingertips, how we use them and how strategic we are in using them remains a challenge. And it's still challenging, particularly to engage our frontline employees. For us, that's people who are based at our operational sites, but also our contact centre employees who have a very sort of rigid scheduled day where there's not a lot of time for them to, be, dipping in and out of Yammer or LinkedIn. So the tools are there, but the strategy and how you roll them out is still, I think, for many of us, a bit of a work in progress. And obviously COVID's changed all of that as well. I know some organisations have been really able to take advantage of COVID and accelerate their use of internal social tools. For us, it's really been an acceleration of Teams adoption, which has been fantastic. That was just what we had at the time when everyone sort of had to go into their bunkers. But now it's really about building out for us a strong internal social channel. We already have a really strong LinkedIn channel. So I'll probably today spend more time talking about Yammer because that's the more interesting one, because we're sort of learning as we go, and we've just relaunched it, whereas with LinkedIn, we're more established. But I've got some learnings to share with you on that as well. So I'll just go to the next slide. So yeah, look, what I'm going to do today is give you a bit of a background firstly on AGL, because I always think it's helpful for people to understand the context of someone's working environment. I'm going to take a little bit of a look at communications and specifically internal communications today. Then, as I said, we'll talk about Yammer and very briefly on LinkedIn. And I'm really hopeful that we'll have plenty of time for questions, because I really want to hear from all of you too about your experiences and how you're going in this new world where so many of us are working in this dispersed environment. Okay, so firstly about AGL, hopefully there's a few of you out there who are customers. If not, please take a look at your energy plans and reconsider us. So first point about AGL is AGL is proudly Australian. We've got over 180 years of history. We're actually Australia's second company to be listed on the ASX. Westpac was the first. And you can see from the pictures, we are Australia's largest electricity generator, and a large part of that is thermal generation, which is coal. So that's a big part of what we do. We're also Australia's largest private investor and backer of renewable energy. So the pictures on the bottom of that slide show solar, wind and hydro that we're in, and we're also moving now into batteries, as well as flexible capacity, which is fast start gas power stations. So in addition to the generation side, we also have more than 4.2 million customers, and we're Australia's largest energy retailer. And our plans are to now move in to the mobile space, which Christy referenced in her introduction of me. We've just recently launched into both broadband and mobile, which is really exciting for us as a company. So we have around 4,000 employees, and that's permanent employees. We also have a large contractor base, which brings us up to around about the 10,000 mark. And it's a really diverse group of employees. They're based at multiple sites in regional areas, and then obviously we've got 2 big offices in Melbourne, Sydney. Actually 3, Melbourne, Sydney and Adelaide, and a small office in Brisbane. And then in addition to our operational side employees who are based at regional sort of locations, we also have contact centre employees who are on the phone every day talking to our customers and helping our customers. There's an enormous amount of change going on right now for our industry. We're obviously transitioning to a lower carbon future that's creating a lot of disruption. There's huge changes in technology and government policy, and that's driving an enormous amount of change for us internally as well. So it's more important than ever that we keep our employees connected with the direction of the organisation, the values and purpose of the organisation, and obviously digital channels play a key role in doing that because, and I'll talk about this more in a second, you know, people really expect to be communicated to inside a company in the same way that they're communicated to in their personal lives. So that really means, you know, digital, fast, you know, engaging, great content, video. People don't just want, you know, a post from the CEO. They're looking for something that will pull them in and give them something to share as well with their friends and family. As individuals, we're a lot more social and connected than ever before. You know, we've got Facebook for our family and friends, LinkedIn for our business networks, and then Twitter for news and views. And this has really changed the expectations of content. We really expect our content to be mobile first. You know, sometimes I think I do my best work on my mobile. I don't know why that is. Maybe I'm shorter and sharper, but I don't know whether that's your experience, but I always check how content looks on a mobile before I send it out, because I think many people are consuming content on mobile, especially corporate communications, which people might prioritise for when they're on the way home or at a later stage in the day when they're catching up on things. We also just don't, it's not enough just to tell people things. When people are not passive consumers, they want an opportunity for the communication to be two-way and for them to be able to give their opinion, whether that's through liking it or, you know, asking further questions. People really are looking for that two-way feedback loop to be open, and they're looking for companies to be more down to earth, honest and transparent in their communications and more open. Employees are very quick to call out if they spot a gap in what's been said to an external audience, even if it's an investor audience, with what's being shared with them. So it's critical for the credibility of the function that that transparency and openness with employees, and as I said earlier, making sure they get the news first remains. So that's key, I think. Content, you know, has to also be relatable. people want to hear from multiple voices in the organisation. They don't just want to hear from the senior leaders. They want the opportunity to hear from their own leader, from their own peers, and so enabling that through digital channels is really important. Sometimes I think the more things change, the more things stay the same at the same time. And I think one thing that really has stayed the same is the influence of leaders on the success of communications, and leaders, whether it's in a digital channel or face-to-face, have an enormous influence on the success of communications. And it's really important that that's always factored in to your planning, and that there's dedicated activities for that group who have an outsized influence on your success. So I think overall it's a lot less about pushing content to employees and more about pulling them in, making sure the content's relevant and engaging. And as I said, they do expect to hear news at the same time or before other stakeholders. Sometimes there's market sensitivities that means that's not possible. But before I get into our current experience at AGL on Yammer and LinkedIn, I firstly want to have a bit of a deep dive and look at what's happening in the internal comms function and some research that I've pulled out. So be really keen, and I know there'll be time for your questions and comments at the end to hear whether this resonates with you. It did with me in terms of the key focus areas for the internal comms function. It's about communicating corporate announcements and changes and updates and relaying vision and strategy. I would say that is, for us at AGL, our key focus. I was really interested to see the strengths of leading internal communications functions. I think to me there was two standouts. They really measured what they did, but they also told people what they were going to measure, why it was important, and then they reported on it. I think sometimes due to busyness and other priorities, you can miss one step in that process, and I think it's really important to set the expectation and then report on it. And then obviously you can't do that unless you've got really good measurement. So really understanding what you're going to be measured on and tracking that super closely is really important in my view. And some of the challenges, I think these haven't changed actually over time. I took a look back to see if there'd been any change, and they're basically the same over the past couple of years. The big challenge, I think, is competing for employees' time. They are really busy, and sometimes they're not engaged for whatever reason, and they feel like they're getting a lot of communications at once. And especially with COVID, we had a real challenge at managing the amount of communication, sometimes within a single day, that we were getting, just because it was such a dynamic and fast-moving situation. So that's certainly something that I can understand. And then another challenge is technology, that people are struggling with leveraging the right technology and the technology well. So I guess that's part of what I'll share with you today in terms of how the tools are there, the technology is there, and I don't know whether it's bad technology or just it's about the strategy to implement and execute the technology. It's not just enough to have a new tool. You really have to put the weight behind it. As leadership engagement is sometimes a challenge, and we just saw how important that is to the success of the function. So obviously that is a key one to get right. And then I think, and you'll probably all relate to this, just the sheer challenge of volume for communicators, and sometimes the support's not there and too much falls on too few. So a couple of themes there coming up in terms of the challenges. So in terms of the impact of COVID-19, I found this really interesting. They did a bit of a deep dive on this, and ironically, COVID-19 has helped the internal communications function in general. I was at a presentation by Wayne Burns recently from the Corporate Public Affairs Society, and he actually had a slide which I loved, which was about the internal comms being sort of like always the brides, never the bride, always the bridesmaid, never the bride, or the poor cousin. And now suddenly in this COVID world, internal communicators have actually become the rock star. So look, personally, that was music to my ears. I've always fancied myself as a bit of a rock star, so I loved hearing that. But I do think, on a serious note, that COVID-19 has increased the visibility and the strategic relevance of the role. It just has to, because suddenly this was an issue that, you know, it was a health issue, it was a safety issue, and now, you know, for us, it's about getting people back to the office. So it's fundamental to the success of the business. So I know for myself, I'm talking nearly daily to our head of people and culture, to our head of safety, and, you know, we've worked so closely over the last year. So I do think people have looked at internal comms perhaps with new eyes, and hopefully appreciation. And the good thing for internal comms is that this is actually driving globally more investment in the function and in the technology. So that's really exciting for all of us. And one of the priorities for many top organisations is improving intranet technology and internal communications apps. So you can hit your boss up with that fact when you're asking for some new budget. But I thought that was good news. Great. So we're now going to get into the practical part of the presentation, which is really to share under the Chatham House rules, I guess, pretty much a live case study of how we're embedding Yammer into AGL and getting it up and running as an internal social platform. So what I'd like to do first, and Emily, I hope you can facilitate this, is run a really quick poll just to help me understand in the audience how you're going with your own internal social channel, if indeed you have one, and there is an option for you if you don't, but I'd really like to understand, and also how active you are in encouraging your employees to be on LinkedIn. So Emily, are you good to run that for me? Not sure.
Let me have a check. 1 second. Emily, are we able to post that? Or Corey? I know Corey is also on the line.
If not, we can keep going, Christy.
No, it's no problem, Nicole.
Problem?
They've already
Okay.
shared the poll, and we're just
great.
waiting on some results. All right. If everyone can just respond, we'll go ahead and compile these results for you, Nicole.
Right, thank you.
People are still voting. I know this question probably requires a little bit of thought.
Oh, it's good to know people are thinking.
Okay, the results are in, and the highest at 45% is mixed success, where they are seeing pockets of success, and that continues. The results are still coming in, but that is still the highest vote, and followed by quite farther along is they don't currently use an internal social tool.
Okay, great. That's super helpful. Thank you. That's great, Christy. All right, well, I'll crack on. And did we get any feedback on the LinkedIn question? Was that most people are on LinkedIn?
The question has just come through. It was doing one poll at a time. So if everybody can go ahead and let us know whether you encourage your employees to be on LinkedIn actively. I'll let you know, Nicole, once the results come in. That's
great. I can, if you can let me know when I get to the LinkedIn section, Christy, that would be great. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Great. Okay, so we'll crack into having a bit of a chat about where communications are at AGL. And one thing we do, which is really valuable and I highly recommend, is we do an annual survey, communication survey, specifically just on comms and how much people like it or don't. It's a little bit terrifying, but it's well worth it. And it does allow you to use data to make decisions, which is absolutely critical as a practitioner today. There's really no excuse not to be. So as you can see, in general, we're, I think, a fairly healthy function. People value the information they receive. People are proud to share it with their friends and family. They like hearing about what's happening in the other areas of the business, and they find the content easy to read and understand. So a few ticks for us on that front. Some opportunities though. Look, as I mentioned earlier, it is a time of enormous change in the industry, and so people don't necessarily have, in fact, only half of our people said they had the information they needed to respond to questions in the community about where AGL was going and where the industry was going. And another opportunity was around the understanding of that external operating environment. So some clear feedback there. And I think also the other thing I'd call out that helped inform our strategy from last year was that people do want to hear about what's happening across the business, not just in their own business unit or area. They want to understand what's happening more broadly. So as a result of all these inputs, there was also some feedback around channels and the intranet not being quite up to scratch. We did relaunch our intranet. We went with Unily, and we also relaunched Yammer in November 2020, so hot off the press. So it's been a very busy time for us as a comms team, and I guess we've got through the exciting launch part, and now we're into that stage of embedding. So firstly, I'll just talk to you about the case for an internal social channel. I was almost going to call this slide internal social, why bother? But I thought that was a little bit blunt. But I think this slide really talks about where the opportunity is for an internal social channel and how it can lift your comms, your channels, enable and support problem solving and listening, encourage greater information sharing and flow, and also contribute to your employee culture. So I think from a communications point of view, just the nature of an internal social channel means that your messages can be shorter and sharper. They can be more interactive in two ways. People can just like something or send an emoticon to show support, and they can be very authentic as well, less formal than say an email from this, a CEO or senior leader. And that opens up, I think, a great opportunity from an engagement point of view. People feel more connected to the people leading the organisation because they feel more human. From a channel point of view, I think we still have a heavy reliance on email. We're actually doing our survey again at the moment, and I dipped in, couldn't wait. It's still open to see how the early results were going. And email is still a much loved channel for us, which is a real challenge because we know that it's not the most effective channel. It doesn't support strong two-way communication, but people still do really love it. And I think that part of that is about weaning people off that channel and that reliance by showing them the strength of an internal channel, that what it can offer in terms of the ability to interact with the content and provide real-time feedback on it. Certainly from a comms point of view, the listening opportunities with an internal social channel are enormous, and then you can respond to that in real time with adaptations to your key messages or addressing gaps in your communication. A lot of information can end up in silos or not shared. We're spread across many locations in Australia. So, we do a lot of the same work. So if you think about big two thermal assets, which is, one's in Traralgon in Loy Yang and the other one is in Macquarie near Newcastle. They both do the same thing, but they can be quite isolated. So enabling that fluid knowledge sharing through a tool like Yammer is a great opportunity for the business. And then finally, obviously just driving that employee engagement because people feel more connected to the organisation. They've got a stronger sense of community, and that an internal social channel, while there's a strong professional skew because it's obviously you are at work, there's also the opportunity to connect with people across multiple locations on personal interests. And some of the strongest Yammer communities we have are like Pets of AGL or Photographers of AGL, where people do share these passions outside of work as well. And that all contributes to people's sense of engagement. So I'm just sharing with you the objectives that we set out for Yammer when we relaunched it, and also, I guess, some of the risks we flagged, which I'm not sure are risks that you may have shared yourself. So I guess the key objective was really to improve the employee experience of AGL's communications and channels, make it more modern, make it more interactive, and drive that sense of community. We did have Yammer before we relaunched it. It was just, I guess, part of the Microsoft suite of products, and it wasn't really launched. It was before my time with any particular thought or objectives. So we actually had to start by repositioning Yammer to communicate its purpose and also show off the new features that Yammer community has over the classic Yammer experience, you know, enhanced mobile, integration with Teams, and also that we were going to use this as a strategic comms channel. It wasn't just going to be a free-for-all share what you had for lunch. There was going to be some clear guardrails around what sort of content we wanted to encourage on Yammer. And we also had to do a little bit of tech tidy up in terms of getting our technology ready, the integration with Teams, as I mentioned, and just making it sure that Yammer was really easy for people to find, that there were shortcuts on the desktop, shortcuts through the intranet, and that people knew how to find it and also knew about the app, which has also really improved since the classic Yammer. So we did have some challenges. We knew it wasn't going to be a walk in the park. So Yammer actually had the lowest use of any communications channel when we set out. So 14% in October, and it also had low satisfaction as well. So we certainly were taking on a bit of a challenge, but I think that we really all believed in the value of an internal social channel, and I'll be really interested to hear from you all in question time about your thoughts on that. We also had to tackle feedback from employees around channel overload and confusion about which channel when they should be using, and as I mentioned earlier, just the sheer amount of change that people are going through and the rate of that change that is really accelerating for everyone at the moment. So those were some of the things we had to overcome. So what did we do? So we gave Yammer a really clear positioning. We positioned it as, you know, the digital water cooler, especially with so many of us working remotely. That resonated really well, and I guess that it was all about showing that Yammer was an opportunity to connect with people less formally, share stories, inspire people, solve problems, and you know that we already had 300 communities which were waiting to be explored. We also have a strong all-company channel and just a few guardrails around avoiding jargon, being inclusive, friendly and open, you know, using GIFs and memes to enhance your posts, just trying to show, I guess, how Yammer differs from a more formal piece of communication. And I know this will probably be tiny on your screens, and I'm happy to provide this after if it's useful for people, but we did also do a do's and don'ts for Yammer. So as I said, those guardrails are important to understand that this is not Facebook at work. It's still a professional environment. And also it's not a place for you to necessarily share your blow-by-blow daily work pattern. It's really about sharing content in a brief and engaging way. And interestingly enough, the sweet spot for the length of a post is between 200 and 500 words, which I found really interesting. Comments and questions are obviously shorter, but that is the sweet spot according to Swoop on the size of a post. So yeah, look, they were really important. We also had a lot of comms across different channels, and we started to get leaders involved as well. So these are some of the tactics we've used to start driving. We launched on the 30th of November, knowing we were heading straight into Christmas, but we used that to our advantage by having a Christmas team party photo competition, which was actually brilliant. Not only did we get to see how people celebrated Christmas across the organisation in different locations and in different ways, we had a really good level of engagement in the competition given where we were at. We had 24% of employees who engaged, and the posts were really good fun and definitely in the spirit of Christmas. most recently, we've just launched our values campaign called, one of our values is Deliver Your Best. And the campaign is actually all about prioritising your own health and wellbeing to deliver your best. So Yammer is a really great community for sharing content on that. And the people have been sharing things about how they stay fit, how they stay mentally well, and the interaction has been great. We've also had people attend like online yoga sessions, sleep seminars, and so that has worked really well for us as a community that's building and also really showing what Yammer can do. We've launched into AGL Mobile, and that we've used Yammer just as part of our comms suite to launch that, and that has worked well. We've had competitions and hearing from the team on how they're tracking. It's been really great to sort of get real-time feedback on as they're making sales. We've also been looking at which communities we can transfer that are strong already on Teams, but really more suited to Yammer, and we've done that work as well. Upskilling and nurturing community managers is really key as well. So strong communities equal a strong Yammer. So we've been putting some extra work into that. So how are we tracking so far? Look, we've done really well. We really started well. We went from 14%, as I said, in October to 56% in December. That's fallen off slightly now to 52%. So we need to get our skates on, but we certainly don't want to slip below that. We've increased first-time users and we've increased leadership engagement. And leadership engagement is absolutely critical, like in any communications effort. The behaviour of leaders is closely watched, and you see much greater engagement with posts if a leader's liking it or sharing it. So that's been important. So just a bit of a note on measurement. I think it's really important to understand what measurement you want to focus on. It really depends on what your goal is, and you want to be quite specific around that. But some measurement considerations. I mean, we've been looking at most active new users, leadership engagement. We've also been looking at engagement with individual posts and most popular posts. But it's interesting to consider what a lag versus lead indicators in terms of the health of your channel, and definitely keep an eye on those and really peg your metrics to what you want to achieve with an internal social channel. So this is what we're aiming for. As I said, what gets measured gets managed, and we've set ourselves some ambitious targets to solve our dilemmas in terms of getting up and strong in internal social channel. So I'm conscious of time, so I want to make sure I've got plenty of time for questions. So I'm going to quickly go through LinkedIn, because I'm sure you're all very familiar with LinkedIn. It's obviously a huge global platform. It's a professional network. We've got 60,000 followers now on LinkedIn, and we've got over 3,500 employees, so a really big employee base. So for me, I always have a bit of a sneak on LinkedIn. I often get a feel for what's really going on in the organisation in terms of what people are celebrating and what people are really proud of, and that really helps me inform what we're promoting internally as well. So here's a slide which shows the top 5 performing posts on LinkedIn over the last 12 months, 2020. And what we see over and over again is that when we celebrate our people and their achievements, that content performs really well on LinkedIn. The other things that drive a high number of likes or engagement and comments. Photo galleries always work really well. Posts that tap into a seasonal theme. Obviously, you can see our operational guys there in Santa hats, and also posts that show us supporting Australians during tough times, such as the bushfires, perform really well. So there's some easy tips. We do also see really strong engagement with posts about our operational teams, perhaps because it's a bit of a mystery to people how electricity is generated, so people like to understand more about that, and it makes for some great visuals, as you would have seen earlier in the About AGL shots, some very majestic looking assets there. So finally, just some key takeaways, I guess, what I would say from a digital channel point of view. Number one is leaders are as important in digital channels as they are in any channels, and they'll influence behaviours. So getting your leaders really engaged with Yammer and also on LinkedIn is absolutely critical. There's some great stats around the percentage change that leaders can drive in terms of the likes and engagement of different posts. Know your metrics, pick what you want to measure, and make sure you're telling people about that and setting goals and then reporting on it. And finally, keep your eye on the prize. And no matter what channel you're working in or what format, the role of internal communications is really about connecting people to the strategic direction of the organisation and helping them make sense of the environment they're in and their role in it and what they need to do to be successful. So I think that's a good overlay to have in terms of when you're developing content and channel strategy, to think about how it's ultimately going to be used to help individuals understand the organisational story and strategy. So that's my final point. Thank you.
All right. That's great, Nicole. We actually do have a couple of questions, and I just want to remind everyone that any questions that we can't get to during the session, because I do realize we've only got 4 minutes left, we will definitely post the answers in the portal after. So sure, do check back. But let's tackle one of the main ones that seems to be popping up repeatedly, Nicole, and this is regarding Yammer. Have you seen any benefits or differences between Microsoft Teams and Yammer? And also, how did you get leaders engaged with them?
Yeah. Okay, so I'll take the first one. The one about Teams and Yammer, it's like I answer that question nearly every day. It's a real challenge, and I think the short answer is you need to think about Teams as your inner circle, your project team, your individual team that you're working with almost daily or very regularly, and you need to think about Yammer as that next circle out. It's your outer circle. It's people who you might run into, you might work with from time to time, you might share a personal or professional interest, but you're not sort of delivering a project together. But it's almost like tapping into a knowledge bank, Yammer. They might do communications in a completely different part of the business, so connecting with them, that's a really good use of Yammer. Or, for example, having a network that's all about communications that might pull in people who work in brand, people who work in customer communications, but I wouldn't work with them necessarily every day. That's a good example. But there is a lot of confusion, I think, with people between Teams and Yammer. Teams is not really set up for the social interaction that Yammer is. Something like we moved like our Thank God It's Cake Friday group over to Yammer, much better suited, much more visual, and the longevity of the thread is much better. So that's the answer to the first part of the question. And sorry, Chrissy, can you just remind me the second question?
Sure.
Was leadership, wasn't it?
How are you getting leaders and executives engaged with them? And because their leaders seem to be scared and wary of
it's a great question. And we are actually doing one-to-one sessions with our leaders, and I'm not doing them myself. A team member is doing them because I think it's less scary for leaders to be able to learn with somebody who's not as senior, and they can be totally themselves. They can also say things like, some have said to me, I think Yammer sucks. So, they can be more honest, although obviously that person didn't mind saying it to me. But they really need help in understanding how to do it, which seems weird because it's quite intuitive and it's like Facebook or something, but they do need that support, and they don't want to make a mistake publicly. And I also think they have a perception that's going to take a lot of time, but really they only need to spend maybe 5 minutes a few times a week. And they get a massive return for that investment, and the stats are there to back that up. So the ratio that Swoop recommend is a 1-2-3, which is post once, comment twice, and like 3 times. So that's sort of your ratio. You should that you should be working to. So you don't have to post that frequently. You do lots of liking, and then do a few comments as well. So that's something to keep in mind. But I would say one-to-one coaching.
Okay, we are in the last 30 seconds, and I try and get to this really quickly. Where does internal comms sit within AGL? Who are your key partners in the company, and how do you collaborate and engage them successfully?
Internal comms sits in corporate affairs. Our key partner would be people and culture, and then the business units themselves, because they all have large numbers of people.
Okay, all right, that's great. I think any other questions, please note we will again post them in the portal after this session. Thank you so much, Nicole. This was illuminating, and thank you for your time.
Pleasure, Christy. Thanks a lot, everyone. Sorry, I can't see you. Bye.
Bye. All right, everyone, we're going to get right to the next session, and you should know, by the way, that there'll be 2 streams, one on internal comms